Okay, we're Lamed Amud Aleph, and we're going through this sugya of what's permitted to do on Yom Tif, even if it's not a malacha. But sometimes things are also because they seem like uvdei d'choil or tircha or mekach memkar, various things that are compared to things that are asa, even though what is not a malacha. Says the Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Maybe an eitzim in asadeh, person is able to bring eitzim from the fields if they, as long as they're disattached, right, and they're within the tchum, he's able to bring them. However, provided it's minat hamachunis, that if an erev yontif he went ahead and he gathered them together, but gathering them together, he's showing that his das was upon them, and they're not muktzah. Mashenkin, if they were mufuzorim, if they were scattered around, then he would not be able to bring them, even though they're disattached, because since they were mufuzor, he was das was not upon them. Okay, so therefore, eitzim and asada, sada is a negative, and mechunis is a positive. Mina karfeif, now karfeif is a positive. The karfeif over here means an enclosed area, as opposed to a sada, it's an enclosed area. Afilu min mufuzor, then you'd even be able to bring from a fuzzer. In other words, the two positives are mechunis and karfeif. Those are the two positives. Why you should be able to use it. Two negatives would be min asada, which is not surrounded, and min mufuzor, which is not what, which is not gathered together. So the Mishnah is saying if you have either one of the positives, you would be able to take it in. So if I'm in a sadeh, as long as it's mechunis, if I'm a karfif, I feel if it's mefuzzer. As long as I have one of the positives, I'm able to do it. Eis a karfif, kol shesamech le'ir de Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda, what's a karfif? Leaning this halacha that if it's mefuzzer, you would be able to go ahead and gather it and bring it in. That's anything that's near the city. Anything that what you use a key for it, even if it's mitoich tchum Shabbos. Okay, so exactly what Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is, the Gemara is going to discuss exactly as Rabbi Yehuda being Yossi being machmir, is being mekel. We'll see Bez Hashem in the Gemara. But the first halach in the Gemara clearly states that from a sada, as long as it's mechunis, you can bring it, and if it's in a karfif, if it's afilim mefuzah. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel, emevi and eitzim element mechunasim share bekarfif. So he needs both positives. He needs mechunasim, that it's gathered beforehand, and bekarfif, it has to be an area that already was surrounded. Even if you had one of the positives, as long as it's karfif, you would not need mechuzah if afilim mefuzah. Shmuel can't argue on a Mishnah. It says, Mesnisan Yichidahi. Our Mishnah is a das of Yachid. And therefore, I guess there are other Tanaim who go according to this individual opinion. The Tanya, Amr Reb Shimon ben Elazar, like Nechaku Beis Shammai u Beis Hillel ala Mefuzarim. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, they do not argue on Mefuzarim shebesadais. These are two negatives, right? It's Mefuzar in the Sada. Good. She'ei Meviim. Everyone says you can't. You got both positives, guys. So this really works well. You got the two positives. You got it's karfif and it's mechunasim shemevian that you could bring it. Where's the machlokes? If you have one positive, as long as it's in the karfif, you have the positive. It's mechunanis. So the Gemara Shmuel is answering that our Mishnah that went ahead and said. Our Mishnah that went ahead and said that as long as you have one positive, it works. That's according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That's according to him, who brings down the opinion of Beis Hillel. So our Mishnah reflects Beis Hillel according to the Tana of Shimon ben Elazar. However, there are other opinions that you need both positives in order to bring it. You need it A in a karfif, and B, it would have to be mechunis. It would have to be gathered together. Amar Rabbi says, Rabbi, let's say you have leaves of grapes and reeds, even though they're gathered together, and they're sitting there, since if a zika would come along, right, it would go ahead and scatter it. We'll view it as scattered already. There seems to be, they're very, very light in their makeup, and therefore they would go ahead and be scattered very easily. So even if mechunis is not, the das is upon them, because Ken Zayin, it's going to scatter by the wind. However, the isnach mona me'edma alayu, However, if you put a weight, a kli on something on these leaves, Erev Shabbos, then clearly your das is upon them, and clearly they will not go ahead and be scattered because you have the weight on top of them, and that would be okay. Good. A is a karfif. We said, what's a karfif? The Mishnah. So let's go see the words of the Mishnah again. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi. Says Rabbi Yehuda, anything that's near the city. Rabbi Yossi says, no, you need a lock. Even if it's b'toichat chum. Iboilahu, hachi kamar. Kol sheslemech le'ir. Rabbi Yehuda said, anything that's near the city. And even though he didn't mention anything about, only Rabbi Yossi mentioned the key, right? But he didn't mention the key. So he needs at least one mila. You have the mila of samach le'ir, but you need, in addition, you would need a paisachas. And you notice you don't need both. According to you, you need both milas. One, proximity, and two, secure, because it has a lock. Comes from Rabbi Yossi, if it has a lock, you don't need proximity. It can even be b'seichat chum. So Rabbi Yossi in this lashon is coming to be mekel. Again, one more time. When Rabbi Yehuda just says in the Mishnah, he says, what's the karfif? Next to the city. We're interjecting the words next to the city with a lock. So you need two things. Next to the city, one, that's close proximity, and two, that it's locked. That's considered mishumer and not muksa. Says comes from Rabbi Yossi, if it has a lock, it can even be farther away, and he's coming to be mekel. It has 1 mile that it's locked, so who cares? Even if it's mitrukat chum, it doesn't have to be soymech le'ir. Oy dilma, or perhaps Rabbi Yossi is not coming to mekel. Hachi kamar kol shesoymech le'ir. The kind of Rabbi Yehuda is saying, as long as it has proximity, bein dislei pesachas, bein glesle pesachas, regardless if there's a key or not a key, a lock or not a lock, it's considered secure and it's considered muchan, it's considered mezumin, and therefore what? As long as it's same clear, it'll be okay. And now Rabbi Yossi is being machmir. V'asar Rabbi Yossi lemeimar afilu b'toichat tchum Shabbos, even if it's b'toichat tchum, which is farther away, dafka dislei pesachas. So he's coming to be machmir. He's coming that what the pesachas is always required. That you need a pesachas. Avalesle pesachas, I feel the circle and namiloi. If it doesn't have a pesachas, I feel the circle and namiloi. So how will you pay shetashma? The Tani Rabbi Yossi Omer, kol shenichnasim loy b'pesachas, anything shenichnasim loy b'pesachas, right? I feel the b'toichat tchum Shabbos. Shmami no Rabbi Yossi tarti l'kul kam. He's saying two things. He's saying soymech le'ir without a pesachas, and he's saying with the tchum with a pesachas. So he's being mekel in both. If it's near the city, you don't need a pesachas at all. If it's not near the city, then you would need a pesachas. Okay. Shmamino Amar Rav Salo Amar Rav Yirmiyah halacha k'Rav Yossi lahakol. The halacha is like Rav Yossi lahakol, right? The halacha would be mekel. Says the Mishnah. Eimav koyin eitzim loymin akoyros. You can't go ahead and crack eitzim, not from beams. Loymin akoyros nishbar yontif, and not from a beam that broke on yontif. So the this is a pashla din imadin. Why can't you crack beams on yontif? I would say it's muktzah. Even though you need it for firewood, it's muktzah. The beams are muktzah. And even the is broke on yontif. So that means bein hashmashos, your mind wasn't on them. They first broke on yontif. So it's telling me the same din. It didn't muktzah. So the Rashi speaks out as zu bein tzarich leim is zu, right? In the first case, you can't, and the second case also. You know, in both cases, you don't tell me. The aim of koyin loy b'kardum. Kardum, the axe here has a wide edge and it has a thin edge. It seems to be that there's a maisa umin if you use the wide edge. There's a maisa seems to be some type of artisan if you use the wide edge. So you can't go ahead when you are permitted to go ahead and crack wood. You can't use a kardum, an axe, because it appears if you're doing maisa umin. Not a saw, not a sickle, but a cleaver, which is used to cut meat, is enough of a shinoi to go ahead that you should be able to go ahead and crack wood. Okay? Let's see Rashi. Let's see the Gemara. The Amit Reisha Eimav Kohen Klau. It's very. If you look at the Mishnah, guys, it doesn't make sense. Eimav Kohen Eitzim. You can't go ahead and crack Eitzim. That's what it says. You can't crack Eitzim. Period. You can't go ahead and crack eitzim, period. You can't do it. And then it says, Loy min hakarish nishvar yontif. Okay. Mashma, Eimav kohen klau. So, l'chayra, the Hav Milke Rashi, V'omer reish Eimav kohen klau, savru time with mastis, and la mishum muktzah, Tana bereisha. Eimav koyin eitzim elam mishum malacha b'tircha. The reason you can't cut wood has nothing to do with muktzah. The reason you can't do wood is because it's a tircha on yontif, so don't do it. Elam mishum malacha b'tircha v'achi kamar. Eimav koyin eitzim loy min hakoyros shanish barim erev yontif. You can't crack wood from that were broken erev yontif, where it's not a muktzah problem. V'oimim lehesek. In other words, let's say you had a bunch of logs in your backyard and you want to be Abraham Lincoln, you want to go ahead and split them open, you won't be able to, despite the fact that the logs were there prepared before Yontif. It's a tircha problem. Al muktzah, it's not a problem because they were there. But to go ahead and crack them, to split them open, is a tircha on Yontif. That's the havamin of the Gemara, that it's not a muktzah din, it's a tircha din. It's a Yontif problem. So says the Gemara, and therefore, the way you read the Mishnah is the following. Back in the Mishnah, that were prepared before, right? You can't do that. Why? Because it's a tircha. Because that's a muktzah problem. So zuv ain't tzarich le'mezu. If guys, even when it's not muktzah, you can't do it. Certainly when it is muktzah, you can't do it. Because again, the hafamina is it's logs that are prepared. And the reason you can't do it is tircha. And then in the case where it breaks on yontif, right? Then it's not even that's zechemuktzah. So Rashi says, not only where it's a tircha, and you're still enough to tell me where it's muktzah. If you're telling me you can't do it at all because of tircha, what difference does it make if you use an axe? What does it make if you use a cleaver? And the end of the Mishnah says if you use a cleaver, it's okay. Guys, look back in the Mishnah. Do me a favor. Let's go back to the Mishnah. Let's stick the Gemara's conscience in the Mishnah. Eimav koyin eitzim that were prepared before Yontif. You can't crack them up. Lo min hakoyros, not from the koyros that were prepared. Why? Because it's a tircha. For lo min hakoyros shenishma b'Yontif, because it's muktzah. Zu vein sarach lo mezu. You tell me the first case, you don't need to tell me the second case. Veimav koyin lo b'kardan lo b'magera, lo b'magol, ela b'kupitz, but you couldn't cook it with a kupitz. 1 second. You just told me it's a tircha. You just told me you can't do it. So how can you tell me that you could use a meat cleaver? That's the problem. How can you tell me you can use a meat cleaver? That's the Gemara's kasha. Back by us, back in the Gemara mid-base. For Amar Reisha, how can you say you can use a meat cleaver? But the Reisha says, Eimav koyin klal. And for the Gemara, Amar Yehuda Shmuel, Ksui Mechsor. The Mishnah is missing words. What does it mean? Eimav koyin eitzim, loy min asavor shel kairis, not from a stack of beans. Why? Because that's muktzah machmas chesaron kits. It's standing there for a building, not for hasaka. It's mahogany wood. It's really, really good stuff piled up. You're not going to use it for burning, so it's muktzah. Because in other words, we just changed. It's not a tircha problem, guys. It's a muktzah problem. Even in the reish, it's a muktzah problem because this is not stam. These koiris are not used for firewood. So therefore, whether they were there before Yontif or they're there on Yontif, you can't do it. There's your missing words. But you can go ahead and crack wood from you chop wood from wood that had been prepared before Yontif, and not koiros, regular wood. And when you do crack, because of it's an artisan problem, saw, magel is a sickle, magera is saw, Tanya Nam Yochi, this is the right peshat. Eimav koyim eitzim loymin asava shel koiris, not from a stack of koiris used for building. Loymin hakoirish nishma b'yontif, v'vishe'ena min hamuchin. Guys, so now it says Rashi opening, v'vishe'ena min hamuchin, meaning it's not a tircha problem like you thought. It's a muktzah problem. V'vishe'ena min hamuchin. They're not muchin. They're not prepared. How are we doing, guys? We're all good. Everyone's good. I got Kenny. Good. Jay-Z, you good? David, you good? Okay. The loy bikar, you can't use an axe. Amar Rav Chinna bar Shalmei mishmei de Rav leishanu el ben nachfus. Now, the axe has a thin edge and a wide edge. The wide edge is called its nachfus, its female part. The thin edge is called its zachrus, the male part. Says the Gemara, you said you can't use a cardam, so we want to go ahead and say, let's fill in the details. That you can't use an axe if you use the wide part, which seems to be the part that the artisan would use. The thin part, mutta, that way mutta, says the pshita, kupitz tanan. Now a kupitz only has a thin part. So if you can use a kupitz that has a thin part, you can use the thin part of a cardam. Says no, tanan. Ma'adutem, I would have thought, how do you mean kupitz l'chudei? Aval cardam kupitz tanan, is that you can use a kupitz alone is only when it has a thin part. Let's say the kupitz has a thin part and a thick part. Since the wide part is asa, hagisa nami asa, the thin part is also asa. Kemash malon, that the thin part is mutta. Look at the masking law seifa. Same dialogue, but on the seifa. Ela b'kupitz, you could use a kupitz. Amar Avchina b'Shalmei mishmei derav. Loishana, you could use a kupitz. Ela b'zachris, only its thin part. Shalo, aval b'nakva shalo, its wide part asa. Pshita, it says why b'kardam tanan, and the kardam has a wide part. So ma'adatem ani mili kardam. The wide part you can't use. The kupitz, since the thin part is mutta, I would say the thick part is also mutta. Kamash malon, that the wide part, the thick part is always asa. Says the Mishnah, you have a house, a room that's full of Paris, and it opens up on Yontif. You could take from the Makam B'chas. Now this l'chayra would be a classic muktzah example. How could you take it? It was in a closed room. How could you possibly go ahead and think that it's going to be available? If it's behind a closed door, how do you think it's going to be available? You can even open it up. The Gemara is going to ask, how can you go ahead and open down a wall? Isn't that stira? Isn't stira asan yontif, a demolition? Says Rashi, or by itself it fell in. You could take it from the place that it broke. We don't say it's muktzah machmas the isra of stira. The ein yachal apoytzcha b'yontif because you're not able to open it on yontif. V'asach that time when you had hesach hadas. In other words, that would be the classic case. I have a wall. Behind that wall is a room, and in the room is fruit. Certainly, my mind's not on it because in order to get to it, you have to break a wall. So it should be muktzah machmas the isra of breaking a wall. It should be muktzah machmas the isra of breaking a wall. You could be breaking a wall, right? Ben Gibron, Laman Aleph on the base. Laman Aleph on the base in the Mishnah.
So how did the fruit get in? It must be a door.
You stored it. You put it behind there, and then you built. Again, I don't think it's a major construction. We're not thinking cinder blocks. In other words, you put it away. The B'chasovi is the type of doorway, and you closed it up. So the Gemara says that you could, if it opens up by itself, you could go ahead and use it. And now Rashi is addressing why it's not a muktzah problem. If it's behind the closed doors and you have no access to it, if you have no access to it, it should be a problem of muktzah. So Rashi says the kivan loyhavi p'chisas isur deraisa. To get it, you don't have to be over into the deraisa. Like the Gemara is going to establish, it's speaking the avira delivni. Guys, it's speaking about cementless bricks. In other words, it's not, you don't have to demolish it to go ahead and get to it. There's just one on top of the other, but they're not cemented. So it's no stira deraisa. So since no stira deraisa, lav muktzah, it's not muktzah. Kida omar gabe a tevel b'shli perka, as we're going to see. So says the Mishnah, if you have a door, have a room, and there's food in the room, and there's a wall or a doorway that is bricked up, as long as there's no cement between the bricks and it falls by itself, your das is on it because it's not cement. You wouldn't have to be over in this the rice of stira of demolishing to get to it. The Tanakama says it will be permitted. Rabbi says, you don't even have to wait for it to fall in. Rabbi is being makel, he's even letting you to create the access. Since there's no cement, you wouldn't be able to go ahead and access the food, and it's not muktzah. Says the Gemara, Amai, why is it permitted to go ahead? Hasvasasa ayala, you're being over by breaking it, you're being over on stira. As you all know now, it's speaking be'avira delibni. It's speaking about where the bricks were laid one upon each other, but they weren't there with cement. Since they weren't there with cement, so therefore it's not a stira problem. Ini is really so that if there's no cement, it's not a stira problem. Rav Nachman, Hani livni de yasami binyana, this livni that was left over from the binyan. You started a building project and you have leftover bricks. Shari tiltinu b'shabata. You're able to go ahead and carry them on Shabbos because they have a purpose. What's the purpose? Since the possibility exists for you to lie down upon them. So since they have a purpose, they're not muktzah. Conversely, sharginu, if you go ahead and stack them up, vaday daktsinu, vaday yuat, you're going ahead and setting aside, that it's still muktzah. Now, obviously, if you took the bricks left over from a building and you put stacking them, you're not putting cement in, and nonetheless, it's still a problem. It's still muktzah. So how can you tell me that our Mishnah is speaking where you have bricks that are stacked upon each other, and therefore that takes care of the muktzah problem because there's no stira problem? We see over here even without stira, because there is no cement in this excess building supplies, and nonetheless, it's still asa. It's still muktzah. That's the Gemara's kasha. That was speaking that din that Rav Nachman was describing was Shabbos. So it's not muktzah machmas by Shabbos, but it's muktzah by Yontif. It's a little shver, you know. If you remember, we spoke out that there's more svar to be makbid by Yontif than there's by Shabbos, because the issur of muktzah according to Rishonim is haitzah, and the haitzah is also on Shabbos is also on Shabbos. So therefore, the need to go ahead and declare muktzah is not as strong as by Yontif. Yet we're seeing over here that in muktzah being more makel. Okay. Amrav Zer b'Yontif Amru Avaloi b'Shabbos. Tanya Nam Yochir Meyo Omer Af Poiches Lechatchila. You can even be Poiches Lechatchila v'Noitel b'Yontif Amru Avaloi b'Shabbos. They said b'Yontif and not b'Shabbos. Let's see Rashi over here. Amrav Zer b'Yontif hit the Reb Meya. On Yontif Reb Meya permitted. Kivin the Rabbanan who the Asar. Mishum Simchas Yontif Shari, because the Simchas Yontif is permitted. Shari Mutter Boy Oichel Nefesh. Avaloi l'Shabbos. Tiltal Kirav Nachman, but it would not be permitted like Shabbos. Okay, I stopped over here because this continues to the next Mishnah. See you, Mitzvah Shabbos. Everyone should have a great Shabbos.